Hello?
Hey, Luke.
Ah, David. Private number, I should have known.
Yeah, sorry about that. But how you going?
I'm well, how about yourself?
Not too bad, not too bad. I'm just calling up today to ask you a question.
A question. I am intrigued. Fire away.
So, we've been friends for a while. We were friends in school, we hung out a lot during uni, played some games, and I was even groomsman at your wedding.
Honored to have you as a groomsman, David.
Oh, thank you, Luke. Pleasure was mine. But, yeah, we've been together for a long time. We don't hang out as much as we used to, unfortunately. Just due to where we live and all that, which is a bit of a shame.
Yeah, a bit of a flight away.
Just a little. So, I was thinking, the next time we meet up, we should do something special.
That sounds good. What did you have in mind?
So what I was thinking, and I'm so glad you asked, Luke, is we'll just hang out. I've got a few things in mind, though. So we can kind of do what we typically do, go out, grab a bite to eat, and go get some drinks. Well, you'll drink, I'll just, sit there. And, we'll head back, play some games, kick up our feet, relax. And then I think what we should do, a little bit different, is take our relationship to the next level.
Right. I mean, that all sounds good. What's the next level?
I am so glad you asked, Luke. I was thinking we should get physical. And what I want to do, Luke, is I think we should beat the absolute shit out of each other.
I see. That's definitely one way to get physical, David.
Oh yeah, totally. In any case, I'm actually flying in this weekend, so I'll see you then.
Oh, like...
Bye, Luke.
As in a couple... What? David? Hello everybody, David and Luke back with you again for another episode.
Hey.
It's been a little while since we recorded, David, although I realize now that acknowledging that potentially gives away the fact that we're just dropping leftover episodes left, right, and center.
Just a little.
Yeah, but, busy lives we have, as Yoda would say, and yeah, it's been a couple months since we last recorded an episode, but it's good to be back.
Yeah, very much so. I'm glad to be back, and yeah, was it January we last recorded?
Yeah, January, and it is now April, so quite a gap.
Quite a bit. Not to date this episode or anything, but yeah, it's been a few months.
No, because this episode definitely won't come out in April. In fact, we have deliberately planned ahead.
Oh, yeah.
Let's not say when we're planning to release this.
No.
Anyway, this is one of your topics, David, and while I know a little bit about what we're going to discuss, particularly the great insight you gave me in that phone call we just had, I'm somewhat in the dark, I guess, which is cool. I am very intrigued as to where this episode goes.
Well, that's good, Luke, because this is definitely one of the topics I really wanted to talk about, especially with you, because, well, if you guys haven't already figured out from the title and the thumbnail, today's big topic is about fighting games, and this is something that's been on my mind for a really long time. And as I just mentioned, really interested to talk to you about this, Luke, because I would say that between you and me, I would be a bit more experienced in the genre, but I would still say that both of us are on the very casual side of things. Would you agree?
I mean, I agree that you are definitely more experienced, and maybe you define yourself as a more casual fighting games player based on the lack of fighting games you played recently, but I reckon historically, since I've known you, you've definitely played your fair share of fighting games, and I think at the very least you're quite good at it. Fully acknowledging that, yes, I'm at the casual end, but let's be real, I'm at the as far as you can go end of the casual spectrum for fighting games.
But I think that's actually perfect, because you will bring a very interesting perspective to our discussion today. But yeah, so we're going to be talking about fighting games today. The first thing I really wanted to just kind of touch on was our familiarity with the genre. We've kind of
or lack thereof.
or lack thereof. We kind of just talked about it just then, but essentially, Luke, you don't really play fighting games, and you've never really had like an interest in them, yeah?
I mean, I suspect that this might come up as part of your discussion, David, but I have played a moderate amount of Smash Brothers over the years, but I am aware that that's a bit controversial as to whether or not that constitutes a fighting game.
Right.
I won't go into that just yet in case, you've got some thoughts that you want to share. But no, I don't really play fighting games that often, if at all. I think other than Smash Brothers games, I've only actually owned one fighting game, which is Soul Calibur 2.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and that was one of those purchases that was very much just finished high school. Now I have a part-time job. I actually have money that I can spend on whatever I want, and I found a secondhand copy online and thought, this is something that I want in my collection.
Yeah.
And yeah, I played it probably twice.
Oh,
and
God. Okay.
That's it.
Wow.
But actually, I played a fair bit of Soul Calibur 2 at your place because you had it on Xbox.
Yes.
And that was the one with Spawn, right?
Yeah, that's right. Soul Calibur 2 was the one where it had like a different third-party character depending on the platform. So we had Spawn on Xbox and you guys had Link.
Yes.
Yeah.
And I loved the fact that it was Link on GameCube. That was really cool. But to answer your question, yeah, I don't really play fighting games. I don't want to derail the conversation.
No, fair enough. I was about to get into a whole spiel there, but yes, no, I agree. For me, pretty much, well, not pretty much the same. I played fighting games for, like, I started off getting into fighting games around when the original Xbox came out. I did play a few fighting games earlier than that, which we'll get into a little bit later, but that was kind of when I really got into them. And then, as I mentioned earlier as well, didn't really keep up with it, and over the last couple of years haven't looked or even touched one in a long time. So I would say I'm like on the casual end of fighting games at this point in time.
Either that or you're just like taking a break.
I guess. Yeah, I guess that's the best way to put it. At least at this stage.
Just out of curiosity, David, what was the last fighting game you played?
Well, again, depending on definition and how people perceive, that would be Super Smash Brothers. So, I mean, personally, I would consider Smash Brothers a fighting game, but that would be the last one I've played recently.
Okay, excluding Smash Brothers.
Excluding Smash Brothers? Oh, geez. Probably... Oh my god, it's been... Geez, I would say about 8-9 years since I last played one, because I think the last one I played was Street Fighter 4, and that came out in like 2009, I think. So,
wow, that is a long time.
yeah. So it's been a while. But no, that's the only one I can think of. Can't think of anything else.
None of the recent Soul Caliburs?
No. Soul Calibur 2 was my first and only Soul Calibur game. So,
David, are you sure? I swear I played the Soul Calibur at your place that had the Star Wars characters.
oh, what number Soul Calibur was that? Was that Soul Calibur 5?
I think it was 4 or 5. I don't think it was 6.
No, 6 is like the latest one that like recently came out. Well, not recently, but like the most recent.
Most recently.
Yeah, most recent.
Yeah. I definitely played a Soul Calibur game at your place with Yoda and or Darth Vader.
Was it with me? Are you sure it was with me?
I've never played Soul Calibur with anyone else other than Soul Calibur 2 with one of our friends, but that was definitely back in high school. So
Oh, maybe I did
Yeah.
have Soul Calibur 5. I cannot remember. It's been that long, so yeah, I've kind of fell off a little bit.
I'm pretty sure you owned Soul Calibur 5.
Okay, well, if you say so, Luke, I will take your word for it. So if that's the case, then that probably would have been my last one. And you said what, 2012 is when it came out?
Yeah, Soul Calibur 5 came out in February 2012.
Oh, wow. Okay, so it's been about, well, actually, yeah, that means 7 to 8 years anyway since I last played it. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
Yep.
Anyway.
that would have been back on your PS3 days.
Oh, God. Remember that? That thing was insane. There were a lot of games we played.
I
on
mean,
PS3.
I loved the PS3, but
No,
that's
no,
just me.
I did too. It was definitely one of those weird parts of the generation where there was like a lot of like weird like games. I don't know how to explain it. It's a weird feeling. Anyway, getting back on track. One of the main things.
Typical tangent.
Yeah, typical tangent. One of the main things I kind of wanted to touch on was why I liked fighting games, and I guess you could also bring up why they've never really struck your fancy. But for me, the main thing that I've always that's always kind of grabbed my attention is just seeing like really cool characters, like well-designed characters doing really cool stuff. And yeah, just seeing them beat the shit out of each other is really entertaining. And I guess that's why people really like watching, boxing and MMA and all of that, because you like to see, people beat up on each other. It's really fun. And
It's all part of the human condition.
yeah, pretty much. We're savages.
That's how deep we're getting on this episode.
Oh yeah. But yeah, that's always kind of been the main draw for me. I also really like the adrenaline or the rush you get when you play like someone on your skill level, or like it's like a really close match. And that's always like it's I think it's like the only kind of game that gives me that feeling. Like I can't think of any other game genre that kind of makes me like sweat or gets my heart pumping, because I'm in like this life or death situation where if I make a mistake, I lose, or if they make a mistake, I win. And it's like this back and forth.
I mean, I feel like you're just describing Smash Brothers, David. You and I duking it out.
Well, yeah. But I think the way we play Smash Brothers is very different than how like competitive fighting games are played. So,
But the vibe and the sort of that sense of who's going to win, and if I slip up, you'll land a move on me, and particularly in Smash Brothers case where you have to literally knock someone off the arena to win the match. It's that kind of sensation of your hands getting sweaty, the controller's all wet, and you're like, oh god, don't make a mistake, land this move. You can't be too aggressive, can't be too defensive. It's all coming to a head at once, and yeah, it gets very intense.
No, I agree. I think with Smash Brothers, for me at least, it definitely has that same feeling, but it doesn't get to the same level, I would say. Just because Smash has all the additional like random chance in it with like items and stuff that can happen. So it never really feels like it's kind of like a life or death situation. Does that make sense?
Unless you're on Final Destination.
Well, unless we're playing, like Omega form levels and no items and all that stuff.
And I mean, let's be honest, the reason we play with items is because they help me to remain competitive against you.
No, I wouldn't say that. I mean, I think back in the day, I used to always push us to play the one-on-one, the no items on a flat stage. And looking back, I always felt bad because it's like, oh, that's so like monotonous and boring and not fun at all. And at least like for us, right? Because I think I had more fun playing with you and, playing with our other friends like all together.
Yeah, but I also think that it's more fun when it's competitive. And there were definitely plenty of those Final Destination no items matches where you would pull ahead by a couple of stock.
Well, yeah. But that was a long time ago. And we haven't like all of our recent matches, which is like still like what, a few years ago, last time we played.
Yeah.
We've always just kind of played typical, kind of the party Smash Brothers.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's essentially why I kind of really fell into fighting games, especially back when I got my original Xbox. I guess for you, since you've already admitted to not really being into the genre as much as I am, was there any kind of like reason as to why, or is it just if something doesn't tickle your fancy?
I mean, I see your point about well-designed characters duking it out, battling to the death, doing really cool stuff. That is certainly something that has appealed to me at various points in time. I think that a lot of fighting games, from my perspective at least, have often been a real graphical showpiece for new consoles.
Yeah, yeah.
So I remember we used to play at your place quite a bit of Dead or Alive
Oh,
on
yeah,
various
that's right.
systems. And to me, they always looked spectacular, whether you go back to the original Xbox. And then I think we might have played a little bit of Dead or Alive on the 360.
Yeah, we did.
They always looked visually impressive. And I guess that's to be somewhat expected because the game's not, rendering out a world that you can traverse through or anything like that. It's usually a fairly flat plane that you're playing on.
Yeah, it's
and
much more focused. Yeah.
Yeah, very focused because you've got those specific move sets that you are utilizing against each other rather than having 10 to 15 different AI programs running in the background that have to run in such a way that they look and feel realistic and don't break immersion with the world. So yeah, I can see how fighting games lend themselves to a sort of a graphical showpiece of any sort of gaming hardware, really. But I think, and even if I didn't know this back when we were younger, I've never been captivated by games purely from a visual presentation standpoint. I've always loved games that have beautiful graphics, but that's never been enough for me to enjoy a game. That brings me to the actual gameplay element of fighting games. I think there's two things that hold me back from really getting into them properly or appreciating what they have to offer. The first is I find them very challenging. And I think the reason I find them challenging isn't because they're difficult to pick up and play. It's because they're difficult to sort of master. And I don't consider myself a pro gamer who masters other genres of games, or there's other games that I own in my collection that I'm an absolute gun at. But to get from the initial skill level that you bring to a brand new fighting game, which is, amateur level at best, and to take that to a more advanced level where you're pulling off more complex mechanics and that sort of thing, I always found fighting games to be particularly difficult in terms of making that transition. Mainly because of the insane combos, right? All those button combinations and everything you've got to remember, and then you've got to pull it off with incredibly precise timing. Very, very challenging, and I guess the reward for me wasn't there.
Okay.
So even if I did manage to pull off some sweet combo, which wouldn't be any of the super advanced ones that sometimes have 15 odd button presses, but I don't know, a 5 or 6 button combination, and I do a really cool move that I hadn't seen before, it's initially satisfying, but not enough to keep me hooked.
I think that's a really fair take. And I think that's kind of a very common perspective with a lot of people who, I guess, try to get into fighting games. Because I definitely had that same, I guess, perspective as well. And I kind of still do because, like I said, I don't consider myself any more advanced than you when it comes to fighting games. I just feel like I've had more experience with them, but I've never really taken that, additional step to kind of get good, essentially. And I've always kind of had those same kind of feelings where it's like, oh God, this is so daunting. It's like you said, it's easy to kind of pick up and play, but to actually get to a level that is actually somewhat, decent, is definitely the harder part.
Yeah.
And it's not all fighting games because a lot of fighting games are very different in how they approach combat, and some are definitely very combo based, like you mentioned, and you have to kind of string together a lot of button presses and timing and all of that stuff. And there are others that aren't as combo focused, but you have to learn other stuff like spacing and prediction and your reaction times, and all of that stuff comes into as well. And it's just oh God, I'm gonna have to dedicate a lot of time to get to a level that's considered decent and not even good in some cases. So
I think your definition of levels just must be either completely different to mine, or you've got a few levels and I've got way more incremental levels. Because I can see what you mean. I'm assuming that when you say we're on the same level, you're basically comparing us to people who play full time. Maybe they stream, maybe they play competitively, and they're just insane. And you're not at that level. But there's definitely a number of intermediate levels in my mind that you're well above or that you've well advanced through ahead of me.
Well, that's very flattering, Luke. Thank you very much. But I essentially, yeah, I guess that kind of makes sense. Yeah, I don't really see us kind of being on that same level as those who, and I wouldn't even say on the same level as those who play professionally, because those people are like, they're like the 1%. But even people who just have a vested interest in fighting games, who play casually, but still are very, they play a lot of fighting games, not just one. I would consider them kind of like the next level in between, us and the pros. So I guess like on our level, there might be sub levels, like you mentioned. But yeah, I guess like as an overall kind of thing, I'm still very, very casual, at least at this point in time. So no, I definitely understand where you're coming from, because that's exactly the same as like how I felt.
Yeah, and I think what I find interesting as well as we're discussing this is there's a lot of talk about us playing against other people, or in terms of the community of fighting games players, there is a lot of multiplayer. Like multiplayer is a huge aspect of it. Whether you're playing online or playing locally or in a games arcade, which traditionally is well known for having larger fighting game communities.
Yeah.
And I guess that's your main option when you're playing or learning or wanting to experience a fighting game. It's playing against other people or playing against the computer. And I think that comes to my sort of second point as to why I've never really been drawn to fighting games is I'm never going to be good enough to play competitively against other people who are genuine enthusiasts or, committed fighting games players. And I also don't find playing against the computer rewarding enough to keep me coming back. So, yeah, I think unless you're willing to put that time in to get particularly good at fighting games, to the point where you can play against other people and be competitive enough that it's enjoyable for you, I'm not sure that the reward is there in the single player experience. And I am quite a fan of single player games.
Oh, yeah.
So,
yeah. No, I think that's also a really fair argument, because like you said, yeah, you can only get so far playing against like the computer or the AI, and you might be able to like pick up all the basics or the fundamentals, but you'll never kind of advance or level up, quote unquote, if you're just playing against a computer rather than a real person. So I definitely get that as well. And the reason why I wanted to ask you why you never really got into it is essentially because a lot of the reasons you pointed out, Luke, are exactly the reasons why I kind of fell off fighting games, like why
interesting.
I stopped playing them. Yeah. Because essentially what you just mentioned are all of the main reasons why even though I really liked fighting games and I did, pick up quite a few, I never continued with them. I never kept it up, or I never looked into other fighting games after I gave them a shot and then, decided not to play anymore. So it all came down to things like, it's just like the learning curve or the time investment. Because if you don't, I guess, commit, then you're never going to really get better. And I guess that's more of a personal choice whether you want to do that or not, because it's not for everyone. And, some people will like it, some people won't. And that's completely fair. For me, I really, really like fighting games, but I think I've never gotten to that point where I've, decided to put that investment in to get better. The other one is definitely, you actually touched on it as well. You pretty much wrote my script, but it's pretty much just finding people to play with to kind of get better, or having those opportunities to get better. Because you can play, the computer, you can play like the single player kind of mode. A lot of fighting game single players are very anemic. Like it's just like an arcade, which is essentially just, fighting all the characters and that's it. So you can do that. And then after that, the only other option is to play online or, play people locally. Back in the day, we didn't really have great internet. And when I got the original Xbox, you had to pay for Xbox Live. And well, you still do, but I never had the money to do that. So I didn't have online access. So I would play fighting games by myself on the Xbox against the computer, and that was it. And there's only so much fun I can derive from doing that.
Well, speaking of that online experience, you just mentioned that back in the day we didn't have great internet.
Yeah.
But is internet today, and obviously Australia's got horrible internet as it is, but is internet today in other parts of the world considered good enough to play fighting games online? Because with fighting games, everything is dependent on sort of response time and instantaneous reaction, all that sort of thing. So
Well,
you will know better than me. Is it the case that fighting games are just simply not really geared towards online play and that you are just better off playing them locally?
Well, I think back in the day, that was definitely very much the case because I think with how a lot of games, and I'm not an expert, this is just kind of based on very general information that I've kind of picked up recently, is that a lot of games weren't kind of built for that. So even though it had the online functionality where you could play people online, it wasn't very good. So there was a lot of delay and there's a lot of lag and it just wasn't a great experience. So offline was definitely the better way to go. I think recently though, there has been a lot of improvement, and especially with the whole like COVID thing, it's kind of given a lot of developers and companies a big kick in the butt to kind of get their online in shape. So from my understanding, my very limited understanding of fighting games, I believe there's kind of like a new standard of online connectivity that they're using called rollback netcode, which is different from delay-based netcode. Delay-based netcode is essentially what I believe to be what a lot of fighting games used in the past. Rollback netcode is kind of like this new iteration of connectivity where it helps mitigate or reduce the input lag and the latency between players online when playing. So it's a lot.
That is very interesting.
Yeah, so it's essentially a lot better now than it used to be, and it's a lot more viable. And again, this is all just general information that I've kind of picked up just, over the last like month or so, just kind of looking back into it and kind of getting into it again. But I believe that's kind of the trend nowadays, so it's much more viable. But back then,
Okay.
yeah, it was like not even a question. Like if you played online, you were like playing against your opponent and like 300 ping, it was
Yeah.
not fun.
Yeah. That doesn't sound fun.
Yeah, so the other one I was just going to touch on was also the arcade scene, because you actually mentioned that as well. And maybe I didn't look very hard, but I'm pretty sure we didn't have a big arcade scene, at least where we lived. And we actually live quite central, city area. And a lot of the arcades that like me and my friends went to, and we would normally go after school, they were like deserted. They were like empty. There was like no one there. And we may have just been going to like the wrong arcade. That's very possible. But I don't think the arcade scene was very big, at least back in the day when we went.
Yeah, to be clear, when I'm talking about arcade scene, I'm not suggesting there were like even tens of people lining up to play these games. I just remember you'd go in to an arcade, and on the odd occasion, you would see someone
Yeah.
who was clearly very good at like a Tekken or a Street Fighter, and you'd watch them and just think, I have no idea how they are doing, what they are doing. And
Yeah.
you're not even just watching their character on screen. You're looking at the buttons and the joystick and all the insane twitch movements that they're doing. And it's
Yeah.
just like, that is impressive. So yeah, mentally I associate fighting games with an arcade, not necessarily because of the numbers of people, but just because of what I witnessed happen in arcades.
Yeah. No, me too. And I mean, well, for me, I've always kind of considered the arcade synonymous with fighting games because that's where a lot of fighting games kind of started, or at least, blew up. But I definitely think that
Yeah.
for us here in Australia, I don't think it was as big, at least where we live. My exposure to it wasn't very grand in that sense. So that was definitely one of the reasons why
Yeah, that's fair enough.
I never really kept up with playing. But with that said, I do want to kind of quickly go over some of the games that did get me into it, because a lot of them, and we've kind of touched on quite a few of them already, just in general.
Yeah.
But I wanted to just touch on a few because there's going to be quite a big gap between the games that we played and the games that have recently come out. But going all the way back to the beginning, and yeah, I'll ask you too, Luke, if you can kind of think back to see what your first fighting game was. But for me, it actually might be the same as mine. But my very first fighting game was actually Super Smash Bros. On the 64. And I think that was like 1999. So that was like my first one. And again, I consider Smash Bros. A fighting game. Some people might not, but yeah, that was my first one. Did you play anything before that, or were you kind of in the same boat?
I actually did play a fighting game before that, which
That is a
may
surprise.
surprise you.
Yeah.
I mean, we've talked a little bit about Soul Calibur so far.
Yes.
I actually played the game that I understand to be the original Soul Calibur. The game that
No way.
wasn't even called Soul Calibur. It's
No.
before that name was ever used. Yeah, Soul Blade on the original PlayStation.
Wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, I played it quite a bit. This doesn't sound like the most
What?
enjoyable experience, but I played it a lot in hospitals actually.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, actually, no. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure I've told you
Yeah,
this,
yeah,
but yeah,
you
when
did,
I
you
was a kid, I had just a pretty random health condition that meant that if I ever got a little bit sick, I had to get thrown on a drip in a hospital,
Yeah.
which just pumped me full of fluid. And I would often be there for 24 to 48 hours.
Mm.
And one of the hospitals I went to had a PlayStation
Mm.
in the little kids ward.
Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
one of the games was Soul Blade. And I played it every time I went in. And I mainly stuck to arcade because I don't think I was there often enough or had access to it for long enough to quite work out how the story mode worked.
Yeah.
But there definitely was some kind of a story mode with like a world map and everything.
Hmm.
So yeah,
Oh,
stuck to
cool.
arcade. My favorite character was Taki. I believe that's how you say
yeah,
it.
the ninja. Yeah.
Yeah, yes. And yeah, completed that arcade mode where you fight against Cervantes, I think. is how you
Yeah,
say
yeah,
his
yeah.
name?
The pirate guy. Yeah.
Yeah, you work your way up to the end. He's always the last person that you fight, and then once you beat him, he sort of respawns like as this undead version of his character, and then you have to beat that guy. But yeah, I played that enough for me to remember it in a reasonable
Wow.
level of detail, because when I ended up playing Soul Calibur 2 with you and our other friend from school,
Yeah.
I remembered some of the basic moves that Taki could pull off, and I even remembered some of the other characters, like was it Siegfried, who also
Yes,
ended up
yes.
becoming a different character,
Nightmare.
Nightmare, and he had the huge
Yeah,
sword.
that's it.
Yeah. So yeah, Soul Blade, I guess
Wow.
the Soul Calibur series was my actual first ever fighting games experience.
That's crazy. Well, that's really cool. That's really cool. Although, like the circumstances around that, not so great. But that's
No, but don't need any sympathy here. To be clear, like most of the time I went in to get this drip plugged into my arm, I wouldn't want to leave because I had access to all these games that I didn't have at home, and I'm like, this is a great opportunity to play some different stuff. How about I stay another day?
oh, that was hilarious.
So, yeah.
Oh, well, that's really
But
cool.
I never played Super Smash Brothers on the Nintendo 64. I never owned the game, and I think I probably played it once or twice.
Oh, wow.
And was so bad at it because I just didn't even know how to play it that I never really got into it.
Yeah, it's very different to how modern Smash Bros is. But yeah, no, that's fair.
Yes,
That's fair.
it is. I mean, yeah, if I go back and play it now, it feels insanely clunky. I feel like, well, for me at least, Smash Brothers took off with Melee. That's where
Oh yeah,
the more
yeah.
modern version of the game was born.
I mean, Melee is still being played today competitively, so yeah, I would say
Yes.
that's a pretty fair assessment. What did you own Melee as well?
Yes, I did. But
Okay.
again, not straight away. I picked up one of those good old silver box player's choice copies, like towards the end of the GameCube's lifespan.
Right,
And yeah, I only really picked it up because you and quite a few friends from school were very much into it. And I just felt like I had no hope of ever being remotely competitive unless I had my own copy.
Which is funny because, as you know, Luke, I never owned a GameCube, so I never owned Melee. So
Yeah. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Yeah. That had not clicked in my head, but yes.
so
That just goes to show how good you are at fighting
Oh,
games.
no.
Like it's in your DNA, David.
Oh god. Well, I wouldn't go that far, but I definitely had a lot of kind of legacy skill from 64 carryover to help. So that's funny. That's funny. But right after that, that was Brawl, and that was when both you and I had
Yeah.
Smash Brothers together, and we played a lot of that too.
Yes. We did play a ton of
Yeah.
Brawl. That's the one and only fighting game that I have played by far the most of.
Yeah.
And it's also the Smash Brothers game that I've played by far the most of.
Oh yeah, yeah. No, I would agree. I would agree. And I, as a slight tangent, I would say it wouldn't be the game we played the most on the Wii. I think that goes to Mario Kart. But the Brawl, yeah, that was a big time sink for me as well. And it was just like well, at the time, it was crazy because it started introducing like third-party characters too. So it was
Yes.
like Sonic and freaking Snake, and I was like, what is happening? So
Yeah, it was fantastic.
yeah, it was freaking amazing, and that kind of goes back to the whole point why I really like fighting games is just because they have these cool ass characters beating up on each other. It's like, oh, it's so good, so good. But yeah, no, Brawl was a lot of fun. Did you get a 4 on the 3DS and Wii U, or did you skip that one?
Yep.
Okay.
No, I got it. We played it, David.
Oh yeah, I don't think we played it a lot, so that might be why I forgot.
No, we didn't.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
We played a bit of the 3DS version.
Yeah.
Because I believe that came out slightly
Oh, it
before
did. Yeah,
the Wii
that's
U
right.
version. Yeah. And then once the Wii U version was out, I don't think we touched
yeah, I
the
don't think we
3DS
ever
one again.
I don't think we ever went back. Oh
No.
But then even with the Wii U version, I don't think we played that very much either.
No, but I see that as the time in my life where I started to lose time to play games.
Fair enough. Fair enough. Yeah, that was like 2014-ish. So yeah. And then after that, we both also got Ultimate, of course, which is
Yes.
pretty much like the epitome of the Smash Brothers series. And I would say, like, as a video game, like not just in the fighting game genre, I would say like Smash Brothers is like freaking huge, right? And
Oh, absolutely.
yeah, like it was just insane.
But what I want to know is, which Smash Brothers do you like the best?
I would say Ultimate is the best. Like, I enjoy Ultimate the most.
Okay, because I know everyone says Ultimate is the best, but which game did they enjoy the most? Because unfortunately for me, Ultimate will never be my favorite, purely because
Really?
I'm a grown adult now and I just don't have time to play it. So I'm not going to have those memories with Smash Brothers Ultimate like I do with previous Smash Brothers. In fact, my response to my own question is probably the wrong one in a lot of people's eyes. I had the most fun with Brawl.
I can see that. I would say Brawl is a flawed game, but I can definitely see that because I was right in the same boat with you. So yeah, no,
Yeah.
I get that. I get that.
There was just quite a few things that I liked. As you've already mentioned, there was the introduction of third-party franchise characters, which was really cool. The final Smash, which
Oh yeah.
definitely needed some work, and the current iteration of the final Smash is, in a good way, very different from Brawl's
Oh, yeah.
because, oh my god, you could get cheap kill after cheap kill
Yeah.
after cheap kill if you used the right character with the right move. But there were also, a few different items like the B-bomb, the thing that just
Oh gosh.
obliterates
yeah.
everyone in its field. I remember that. I remember you and I were playing that, and we didn't even know what that item was, but one of us picked it up and threw it, and it exploded, and we were both just like, wow, that's
Yeah.
epic.
Yeah.
And then there was all the additional content like the Subspace Emissary,
Oh my gosh. Yes.
which, look, I'm not the biggest fan. Like, I'm not a die-hard fan of that mode, but I did enjoy it. Like, I played through it, and it was just interesting to explore, particularly with all of those cool character-based videos that you got
the
to watch
cutscenes.
between
Oh
the
my
different
god,
levels.
I love.
Yeah, sorry,
those
the cutscenes, yeah.
they were so good. That was like the main reason I played through Subspace. It was just to watch the
Oh,
cutscenes.
absolutely. Yeah. And I think a lot of players, and I definitely count myself among them here, were potentially let down with Smash Ultimate's story mode, I guess, because before the game came out, there was that really cool cutscene of,
Yeah. Yeah.
Mario and the other characters being, I don't know, converted to
obliterated.
evil or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, well, their eyes turn red and everything, and you're like, oh my god, what's going to happen? What's this story all about? And then there is no story. Well, I'm sure there is, but there's no cool cutscenes to take you from A to B, from
yeah.
the start to the finish. There's no teaming up of like Samus and Pikachu on their own little journey, and
Oh my god.
how the different characters would have intertwining stories. It was just basically a beginning video, an end video, and that felt like the sum of it. So
Yeah. No, I agree. I'm definitely in the same boat. I definitely feel like the Ultimate single player is kind of a step down.
yeah,
But, I think like overall it is a more complete package just with, I guess,
yes,
the breadth
yes.
of content that's available.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, as we were saying before, like so much of fighting games and the experience they offer is the multiplayer.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
knocking Ultimate because of its lack of single player is also not entirely fair, and it is the most complete version of Smash Brothers if you're just looking at the mechanics of that game, the fighting experience that game provides.
But no, I definitely get what you mean with Brawl, because I definitely have that kind of same sentiment. I just feel like, yeah, Ultimate is more of a whole package, but yeah. It's tough, man. They're both good. They're both good.
Ultimate is technically better, but I have better memories of Brawl. That's what I'm going to land on.
Well, I didn't want to force you to say it, Luke, but okay, I'll take it. But outside of the Smash Bros. Series, to get into some other actual games. No, I'm just kidding. But the other one was, we touched on this one already as well, which was Soul Calibur 2. And that was the one where both you and I had it. And apparently I owned other Soul Calibur games, which I don't even remember. So I guess I had Soul Calibur 5 too.
And let me be clear here, I don't consider myself to be like a proper owner of Soul Calibur 2. I did not have it during that generation of consoles. I bought it, I'm pretty sure after the Wii was out, just as a collector's piece.
Oh, I see. Oh, okay. Yeah, because I got it and I played it like when it came out. So that's interesting. But I think with Soul Calibur 2, it was kind of like my first. Oh, actually, I don't know if I got this before or after Dead or Alive. I think it might have been after.
You got it after.
Yeah, I think it was after the first.
How do I remember your life better than you?
Yeah,
did?
I know. What's going on, Luke? Maybe you should run this episode. But yeah, I think
Dead or Alive 3 was your first Xbox game, wasn't
yes,
it?
it was. And Soul Calibur 2 was, because Soul Calibur 2 was released in the same year, but I think I got it after. So yeah, I think that's where the confusion is. But no, Soul Calibur 2 was really cool because it was another like 3D fighting game, which is akin to, Dead or Alive and Tekken. But, it had the whole weapon system, and all the characters are like crazy and the story's whack. But it was a lot of fun, and like it kind of just boils back to the original interest I had, cool characters doing cool shit. And I think Soul Calibur 2 also had like, I wouldn't say it's like super fleshed out, but it had a very extensive like single player weapon master mode. Do you remember that?
Oh, yes. And now that you say it, I think that's what the mode was called in Soul Blade.
Oh, really? It was called the same thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, that's probably where they pulled it from then. Yeah, it was really cool. It was kind of like a very like watered down, simplified like RPG. Like you gained experience, you gained gold, you could get new weapons, and you would unlock stuff as you progressed through it. It was like crazy. It was very like arcadey. Like it was essentially just like fights back to back, but there was like little like text stories in between to kind of give you, this connected thread of your journey, which was really kind of fun and novel at the time. And I guess it was a good way to kind of have like a single player journey without a big budget, like with all the cutscenes and stuff that you would find in Brawl. But
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, no, it was a lot of fun. I really enjoyed Soul Calibur 2. And like kind of like what you mentioned on before, there was a lot of memorable characters, because I think my favorite character was definitely Nightmare. So big old knight with the soul edge whacking people. That was a lot of fun. And I as I mentioned before, I don't really remember Soul Calibur 5. The one thing I do remember about Soul Calibur 5 though is that it had like a really cool character customization tool. And I think 6 also has it and has improved on it, which is even better. But I really enjoyed that because you could kind of make your own character essentially, which was fun.
That is cool.
But outside of that, definitely have to mention Dead or Alive. So Dead or Alive 3 was definitely my first kind of like real main fighting game that I really enjoyed. And also, man, you essentially like brought up all of the main points I was going to talk about, Luke. But with Dead or Alive...
Sorry, David.
That's okay. But with Dead or Alive 3, the main reason I picked it up was because it looked like the most like realistic fighting game at that time. Like compared to everything else, I was like, oh my God, these characters look real and they're like smashing each other.
And the environments.
Yeah. It was crazy.
There were stages with destructible stuff, right?
Yeah.
Like you could throw someone through windows and then you'd move to a different part of the stage.
There were like actual like stage transitions. And I think other games did have this as well. But I think the way Dead or Alive did it, like it was such like a big spectacle. It was just like crazy. Like I remember there was like this big seaside beach level where you kind of start on like this walkway with all like these open stall markets. And then if you kind of fight towards like stairs, you could knock them down the stairs and then end up on the beach.
Yep.
And it was like crazy.
Yeah, I remember that.
Yeah.
Yep.
It was insane. It was just very realistic looking, and I really liked the whole counter system. So, because like you had like your general punches and kicks and throws, but you also had a counter system where if you performed a counter while an opponent was attacking, you could redirect that on them, which I don't think was very prominent in a lot of other fighting games. So it was kind of unique to Dead or Alive, at least at the time, which I really liked.
And I think I really hated it whenever you did it because it just made it impossible for me to win anything.
Yeah. I mean, in your defense, you never played Dead or Alive. You never owned Dead or Alive. So it was kind of unfair for me to beat up on you, but I had a lot of fun.
Yeah. Actually, I've just had a flashback to a cool character, sorry. And this isn't Dead or Alive, but like, do you remember Voldo in Soul Calibur?
Oh, yeah, like the mummy guy who was like all...
He was like a mummy with claws.
Yeah,
like Edward
yeah.
Scissorhands
Like
claws.
the
Yeah.
chakrams or whatever. I don't know. But yeah, he
Yes,
was like,
yeah.
he would like crawl on all fours, but he would bend the other way. It was like, what are you
I know.
doing?
He was wild.
He was freaking.
Anyway, back to Dead or Alive. I just had
No,
that thought
it's
pop
all
into
good.
my head.
It's all good. Like I said, man, characters in fighting games are amazing because they're so memorable and well designed. It's like, God, what is up with this freak? And it's like, I want to play them. So, no, I get it. It's
Yeah.
cool. Outside of Dead or Alive 3, and I think Dead or Alive 3 as well is kind of like, it was like one of those showpiece games for the original Xbox because, the original Xbox was kind of like the first foray for Microsoft into the gaming sphere. And I think
Yeah.
Dead or Alive 3 kind of capitalized on that to kind of show off, oh, look at all these awesome graphics and stuff. So I think that was also part of the reason why I got sucked in. But outside of that, I also got the follow-up, which was Dead or Alive 4. I actually don't remember a lot about Dead or Alive 4, honestly. I think it was just a very prettier, nicer, Dead or Alive 3. So
Yeah.
Oh.
That was on the 360, wasn't it?
that was
Dead
on the
or Alive 4?
360, yeah. So that was another generation.
I mean, you probably don't remember much about it because you had so many red rings of death that
oh my God.
would have interrupted
Oh,
your
God.
enjoyment of the game.
Yeah, that was not a good time, man. Luke knows, but I think I returned like four 360s
Yep.
during my whole ownership, and it was
And that was ultimately the reason you got a PS3.
yeah,
was because
I
you
completely
got sick of returning them.
I jumped ship completely back when console wars used to be a big thing. But yeah, that was the other one that I played. And then I did actually touch on this before as well, but the other main fighting game that I played was Street Fighter 4. And
Yep.
this was, I didn't know it at the time, but apparently Street Fighter 4 was like a big deal. Apparently in the fighting game community, apparently Street Fighter 4 is like this big kind of resurgence of not only Street Fighter, but also brought in like a lot of new people into fighting games as well, which I guess makes sense because I kind of got into it because I didn't really know much about fighting games outside of Smash and Dead or Alive until Street Fighter 4 came out, and I was like, oh wow, this looks really cool. I want to give it a go. So I guess I was one of those people who got sucked in at the time as well.
Yeah, well, I mean, with Street Fighter 4, I was thinking about this the other day. What was before Street Fighter 4? I mean, I assume it was Street Fighter 3, but
Yeah.
what platform did Street Fighter 3 come out
Well,
on?
I think Street Fighter 3 was in the arcades. With Street Fighter 4, I think because Street Fighter 3 was still like sprite based, Street Fighter 4 was kind of like the big, step into the console generations with, 3D, well, 2.5D, I should say.
So I've just looked it up, and you're right. So it was primarily arcade in 1997, and then in the late 90s, early 2000s, it got a release on Dreamcast.
Oh, okay.
But it's genuinely quite interesting to me because that means the PlayStation and Nintendo 64 era did not have a Street Fighter game. Even though Street Fighter 2, I'm pretty sure, was a big deal on the Super Nintendo.
Yeah, Street Fighter 2 was huge.
The PlayStation 2, Xbox, and GameCube generation also didn't have a Street Fighter game.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I'm sort of... This is unfair, and Dreamcast and Sega fans will hate me for it. I'm kind of dismissing the Dreamcast version because
yeah.
you said it was an arcade game, and it clearly made it to the arcade first a couple of years beforehand.
Yeah.
And the Dreamcast was, unfortunately, not a particularly successful console.
No.
So if you take out that particular instance of Street Fighter 3 release, there was 2 entire console generations where there was no Street Fighter because, as you say, Street Fighter 4 was PlayStation 3, Xbox
Yeah.
360, and I remember it looking so incredible from a visual standpoint, not just because, it was a phenomenal looking game, but it was part of that HD era. It was
Yeah,
obviously the
yeah.
first Street Fighter we'd ever seen in HD.
Yeah, no. It was a big deal. And like I said, at the time I didn't really think much of it, or I didn't even realize. But yeah, it was a big deal. Because that was 2009, wasn't it? Street Fighter 4?
That is a great question. Let me quickly check on that for you, David. You are correct. It was early 2009.
2009. Okay, yeah. So
What is interesting, I will say, just clicking around the Street Fighter history on Wikipedia, I don't know my stuff at all. It looks like Street Fighter 2 in its original form was basically an arcade-only game.
yeah.
Because if I go to its page, yeah, it says platform arcade, and then there's Super Street Fighter 2, which of course, with that super prefix implies Super Nintendo. And yeah, Super Nintendo, Sega Mega Drive, it was released on those two platforms about a year after the arcade version. But
Oh, okay.
yeah, Street Fighter definitely has a big history in the arcade. Because
Yeah.
if I even look at Street Fighter 4, we were just touching on the fact that it came out in 2009. It actually came out in mid 2008 in the arcades. So
Yeah.
about 6 to 9 months beforehand. And that sort of surprises me in a way because I thought at that point in time it was widely known that arcades were dying out.
I think it was the right time, right place, where it just kind of drew in a lot of new people, especially with it, kind of debuting on the new gen consoles at the time. So it just blew up exponentially. So
Yeah.
yeah,
And unfortunately, I don't think Street Fighter 5 had the same impact.
that's really interesting because I also remember the launch of Street Fighter 5 being very lukewarm.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
I will be honest, I don't know why. This just goes to show my lack of knowledge of the Street Fighter universe. But yeah, I don't know why that is. Are you across that, David?
A little bit. I believe it was mostly just to do with the launch state of the game. So very similar to, well, honestly, a lot of other fighting games. There wasn't a lot of content. Like it was just very bare bones. Like you had multiplayer, you had like an arcade, but a lot of the other stuff, like a story mode and characters, they were more added on like later, which really kind of killed momentum. And I think with the Street Fighter series as well, in general, it generally changes like a lot of like the mechanics, like a lot of the core stuff transfers. But I think a lot of more special mechanics kind of change each, version or each game. So I think maybe some of the changes weren't well received. So
Interesting.
yeah, again, this is just general info that I've kind of picked up looking into it recently, but apparently it's a really good game now because it's had like,
So many games are like that these days.
I know, which is really annoying. But apparently with all of the updates and season passes, it's like as a complete package, it's really good now if you get like the big, arcade edition, which is like everything combined. I have a few thoughts on that, but that's not for this video. But yeah.
I mean, I know less than you do about Street Fighter 5, but I can already tell just from glancing at the Wikipedia page, the arcade version came in 2019, whereas the console version was 2016. So already they've thrown their original core audience under the bus to, make the money on the consoles. But another odd thing, it was PS4 only? It's on PS4 and Microsoft Windows. Wasn't on Xbox. What the hell? Sony must have paid some sweet console exclusivity fee for that.
I would have no idea, but wouldn't put it past them. But outside of that, yeah, those were essentially all the main fighting games that I have really kind of dabbled in. Like I said, it's not a lot. Like looking back, I think that's only what, like 7, 8 different games, and a lot of them are just, sequels of the same series. And
Yeah.
outside of that, I haven't really touched anything since, well, I guess in this case, Soul Calibur 5, which was a long time ago. I guess what really kind of kept me away all of this time is a lot of the stuff that we've already talked about. So just like looking in on fighting games like from an outsider, it just seems like a very daunting task to kind of get into and get good enough to play at a somewhat decent level to enjoy yourself, right? And
Yeah.
the other thing is actually something that we just brought up was the lack of content. Like a lot of it is just multiplayer. Like you have your versus mode, you have your online modes, you have a very bare bones arcade mode. And then that is pretty much it. And there are very few fighting games that do more beyond that from what I've seen. I could be wrong, but from a lot of what I've seen, that is basically it. There are definitely a few standouts that have taken the single player side a lot more seriously. And the first one that comes to mind is, I think, NetherRealm Studios. They're the ones who do Mortal Kombat and Injustice, if you've heard of those. I'm sure you've heard of Mortal Kombat.
Definitely have. Yeah. I've heard of both.
Okay.
Fully acknowledge, though, that I have not played either of them.
Yeah, well, that's fair. But they've taken to like a full-fledged single-player story mode, very akin to, I guess from our experience, the Subspace Emissary from Brawl, but they've made it like, good. So that's essentially what I know of the NetherRealm games for Injustice and Mortal Kombat, of the recent titles anyway. And I would say like out of any other fighting game, I think they have like a really good like balance between single player stuff and multiplayer stuff. And that's kind of what's kind of kept me away from a lot of fighting games and kind of getting back into fighting games is just, I don't want to like pay full price for a game, right? And only play it for like a few hours and then, drop it.
So out of curiosity, though, David, what's kept you from playing Mortal Kombat?
That's a really good question. I think for me, it's just the style of gameplay of Mortal Kombat and the Injustice series. I'm not a fan of how those games play. Like, there's nothing wrong with them, but it's just like I'm not a fan of.
Just not your style.
Yeah, it's just, it doesn't click with me. And a lot of the characters aren't really characters that I would like enough to invest time into. So yeah, it just never really clicked with me, unfortunately.
Well, I mean, that makes a lot of sense because, as you said, the things that drew you to fighting games were
Well, yeah.
cool characters doing cool stuff and like being able to pull off that cool stuff. And if neither of those appeal to you in the Mortal Kombat series, then yeah, answers that question.
Yeah, I guess. But like, I can look at those series as an outsider and still, I can see the cool stuff in it. And I really want to like it, but I just don't. So it might just be personal taste.
Fair enough.
Yeah. It's definitely just a preference thing in this case. But yeah, those would be essentially just the main reasons why I've never kind of gotten back into it or why I've never really given it another chance. Of course, the other one being the huge time sink, right? Because it's a commitment. Like
Yeah, absolutely.
if you want to get good, you have to spend the time to get good. So yeah,
I don't have that time.
which is fair enough. And I think a lot of people don't. So, to each their own. That said, I did want to say that I've started to turn that around recently, which is the whole point of this episode, because the main reason I wanted to talk about this, fighting games and all of that in general, is that I've started to get back into fighting games a little bit more recently, like over the last couple of months to half a year. It hasn't actually been in the form of actually playing any fighting games. Like, I don't think I've played any fighting games in the last 6 months. Or actually in the last couple of years, except for Smash Bros. But I've been actually like consuming a lot of like content, like watching other people play, streams, and even just like topical videos and video essays about fighting games online. And I'm just getting a lot more exposure to like content creators as well around fighting games that have kind of actually started getting me interested in it again. And
Well, that's cool.
yeah. I've talked to you about this recently as well with the upcoming release of Street Fighter 6, which actually should be coming out like in either this week or, a few days based on when this video is uploaded.
David, that's a risk. What are you doing?
I know. My bad. You can edit that out. Anyway.
I will.
But with Street Fighter 6 coming up, I think this is kind of like the perfect time for me to give it a go again. Because it essentially has everything that I've wanted in a fighting game. At a core level, I enjoy the Street Fighter system because I played Street Fighter 4, even though that's only one game, right? I did enjoy it at that time. I didn't get, super into it. Like I played the arcade and that was pretty much it. But I enjoyed the basic system of Street Fighter. So with that, I'm hoping, I can still enjoy Street Fighter 6, unlike,
That would make sense.
yeah, unlike the NetherRealm games, which I can't really get into. But on top of that, they also have single player content. Like there's actually like a world tour mode, which is kind of like this single player thing where you create your own character and you go through all of these, single player activities and fights and stuff. So there's actually like content there for you to do outside of multiplayer. And on top of that, with the multiplayer, they've created like this whole like PlayStation Home version of Street Fighter where you can kind of
Oh my god, PlayStation Home.
yeah, it's crazy. Like I'll send you a link to a video just to kind of showcase what it's like, but it is nuts. Like you hang out in this lobby with like I think up to like 100 people and you can just do all this random shit together. It's like crazy.
Do you have an apartment?
No, it's just like a lobby kind of thing. So it's not as advanced,
Okay.
I guess, as Home. But I guess the focus is, more on the fighting. So they want to
Yeah,
kind of keep it somewhat focused. But the fact that they're even doing that though is just like that's good. Like that's what they should do. They should make fighting games more appealing to more people because, that's what will get people like me interested in again.
Without diluting it though, right?
Without
You don't wanna-
diluting it. Because
Yeah.
I've watched a lot of like footage of Street Fighter 6 and like because they've had like I think 2 closed betas at the moment, and I've watched a lot of matches and like the core mechanics and the core gameplay is really, really well, it looks really solid. And based on what a lot of people have spoken about, they think it's like really good too. So I'm very, very excited. So yeah, with Street Fighter 6 coming up with a lot of like the content creators and streamers and things that I've been watching, I started to get that itch again to like really get into it. And there's like a lot of, and Street Fighter's always been great with the characters as well. There's like a lot of really interesting characters. And what Street Fighter I think does really well is that they always have like characters based on different countries. So they have like, the World Warriors, and then they have other characters from other countries as well for representation.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So most people can kind of find someone that they either relate to or like, or even if they're not, from the same country, they might just like their design or whatever. So it has like a personality that I feel like a lot of fighting games don't have.
Personality is important.
Personality is
I do like games
super
with
important.
personality.
Yeah. Because you can make like one of like the greatest games mechanically, but if it's boring as sin, like, what's the point? So
Yeah, I feel like some of those earlier fighting games that I played briefly or, played on the side either at your place or just in hospital, I think they had personality. Like
yeah.
Soul Calibur definitely did. And
Oh,
I
yeah.
remember Soul Calibur, in particular, the weapons. And as I touched on before, the unique characters like Cervantes and Voldo and all that. And like, it was always really unique in a way, not like anything you'd see anywhere else. And
Yeah.
Street Fighter definitely had personality. Like, I was never going to pick up the game and play it properly myself. But Street Fighter 4 in particular, well, Street Fighter 4 in my mind had such visual distinct personality
Yeah,
as well.
no, I agree, 100%. And with
Yeah.
Street Fighter 6, I think they've kind of just taken that to like the next level as well. It is very hip hop inspired, like the aesthetic is very hip hop centric.
Well, that's actually really interesting. That's definitely keeping it with, current cultural trends as well then.
Yeah, no, I would agree. And it actually blends really well into the whole concept of being like a street fighter. So I think that thematically it's like perfect.
Yeah.
So no, it's really, really good. And I think they're using like the RE engine as well. So the characters look like they're not super like realistic, but they're more realistic than they've ever been. But they still kind of have those kind of cartoonish qualities to make them, a bit more distinct.
Yeah, that's good. Because the cartoon to me is definitely part of Street Fighter's personality.
Yeah, no, I agree. So I'm glad they didn't go full on like Resident Evil, like remake kind of realism, because I do feel like that might be a little bit weird. But
Yeah,
'Cause
that
it-
would be weird.
because it might go into kind of like uncanny valley. But I think they kind of struck a nice balance. I wouldn't say that like it's perfect, but I really like the design of the characters as well. So a lot of the visual presentation of the game is really kind of ticking all my boxes as well. So I'm really keen, really peachy keen.
I am definitely keen to know what you think of this game when it comes out. David. Because, yeah, of everyone I know, you are the fighting game guy. And
Oh god, yeah.
it'll just give me a good sense of where that particular genre is at and where Street Fighter's at. And because, yeah, I've never really been into fighting games, so it's not something that's really on my radar very often.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's still fascinating to observe and keep track of.
Yeah, no, I agree. And it's definitely something that I personally want to spend more time in, because I want to at least give it a shot, because I've never really personally dedicated time to it. And I want to at least try. And even if it turns out the same as it has in the past, where it doesn't click, I can't get into it, and then I eventually drop off, that's fine. I gave it a shot. But yeah, I just want to try. And I think Street Fighter 6 will probably be as good a time as any to kind of, jump back in. Because it's kind of doing everything I want fighting games to do. And hopefully it turns out well. So, who knows?
I hope for your sake, David, that it turns out well.
Well, thank you, Luke.
Because seriously, there's nothing worse than getting excited about something that's coming up in the future. Or I often think as well, particularly with things that maybe tug on nostalgia strings a little bit, things that you maybe spent time doing in the past, and for whatever reason, either you lost interest or those things changed a little bit, and so you didn't engage with them as much later on, but then all of a sudden there's like a resurgence, and
Yeah.
the old guard is coming back.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. So hopefully it'll kind of be like another Street Fighter 4 situation where it just gets like a whole bunch of people in, and it'll just keep growing and growing. And, hopefully we get more good fighting games. So it'll be very interesting to see.
That would be a great outcome, and it would also be great if the failure of Street Fighter V can be seen as an example, and developers, and I guess publishers really, can learn from that and not make similar mistakes in the future.
One can only hope, Luke. One can only hope.
Yeah. It's all very fascinating to hear the perspective from someone who traditionally really enjoyed fighting games, but then lost interest due to reasons beyond their control. I mean, that has definitely happened to me with other genres of games.
Yeah.
I think you can probably guess first-person shooter was a big
Yeah,
one for me.
yeah.
But maybe we should do a series. No, that's crazy. Games that we used to love that we no longer do, that maybe we will again. No, that's a bit too niche, perhaps.
We'll put it on the list.
Yeah. Good discussion. Good discussion.
Cool. No, I had fun.
Well, if that's it, David, then I think once again, having failed to stay under 1 hour, we
Oh,
should wrap
God.
this up.
Yes, we should. Well, thank you all for watching, all you beautiful 3 listeners, as always. I think that's pretty much, all we got. So we will see you guys on the next one.